You're so cute! Oh my goodness, you're such a baby! Are you a baby? Oh, I gotta take care of you. You're a little boofer. Come on. What a little boof. Oh my god, you're too cute. Come here, little boof. You can sit right. You can sit right there. No problem. Cute girl. It was exactly 50 years ago today, December 28th, 1974, when audiences were first introduced to the fourth incarnation of the Doctor, played by the legendary Tom Baker, in the premiere episode of Doctor Who's 12th season, Robot, Part 1. It all began with a third Doctor, played by Jon Pertwee, having been exposed to a lethal dose of radiation from Metebelis 3, aka the Spider Planet, collapsed on the ground and regenerated into a younger man who had a shock of curly brown hair, wild, expressive eyes, and a giant Cheshire Cat-like grin. The fourth Doctor had arrived, heralding the beginning of the era that would eventually come to be known as the Golden Era of Doctor Who. The new era was led by a young, ambitious new producer in the form of Philip Hinchcliffe, and an old hand given new responsibilities in the form of script editor Robert Holmes. This killer pair would embark together on an epic journey that would take Doctor Who to new heights of greatness and popularity, and it all started one winter night 50 years ago. I've individually reviewed the 5 stories featured in this season over the past year. Now join me as I review the entire season as a whole. I'll drop a brief bit of history, then move on to the cast and crew, then ranking the episodes best to worst, and end with a final assessment of just what made this season of Doctor Who shine so brightly. So grab your favorite rainbow scarf, chomp down on some jelly babies, and never forget,
there's no point in being grown up if you can't be childish sometimes.
Now let's get into it. This is Tom Baker's very first season as the Doctor. It's the end of the Barry Letts and Terrence Dicks era of the show, and the start of the Philip Hinchcliffe and Robert Holmes era. Philip Hinchcliffe had been working for the BBC as a script editor before being elevated to associate producer, and then was finally picked to be the head producer of Doctor Who. He was 29 at the time, an ambitious young man bursting with ideas. Robert Holmes was an old hand at this point, having written several classic stories for Doctor Who, such as Spearhead from Space and The Time Warrior, and was elevated to fill the role of outgoing script editor Terrence Dicks. Outgoing producer Barry Letts stayed on for a couple of months, and Philip Hinchcliffe shadowed and learned from him during this time period. Terrence Dicks wrote the first story of the new season, to set the series off on the right foot before he left. Jon Pertwee wanted to leave after his 5th season for a variety of reasons. Roger Delgado, the first actor to play the Master, the Doctor's arch-nemesis, had tragically died in a car accident in the previous year. Katie Manning, the actress who played Jo Grant, his companion for the past 3 seasons, had also just left at the end of the previous season. On top of that, the producer he'd worked with for his entire run on the show, Barry Letts, was also leaving at the end of the 5th season. And finally, like many Doctor Who actors, he worried about being typecast and not being able to find work post-Who. Barry Letts was tasked with finding the new Doctor actor before he left, and he ran through a variety of more well-known actors who thankfully didn't pan out, before Bill Slater, the head of the serials department at BBC, clued him into another actor that he'd had his eye on and found interesting, Tom Baker. Tom Baker had worked in the National Theatre and appeared in a few Hollywood films, but was down on his luck and, in his own words, desperately unhappy and not very well, and working construction to make ends meet. Then, he got the call that changed his life forever. Bill Slater had seen Tom Baker in action in the BBC drama The Millionairess, and was impressed. So when Tom Baker gave him a call asking about work, he realized he could be the perfect fit to play the eccentric, mysterious, commanding Doctor. Lucky for Baker, a Hollywood film in which he played the lead villain had just released in theaters, the Ray Harryhausen classic, The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. Barry Letts decided to go see it, and within minutes of Tom Baker appearing on screen, he knew he had found his Doctor. So there you go, that's a brief rundown of the history of the show, what got us here. Now it's time to actually get into the review portion of it, and we're going to start out with the cast. Tom Baker is Doctor Who. I don't know any other way to put it. He defines the character in such a concrete way that every actor after has undoubtedly been influenced in some way by his performance. He's just simply everything you would want from a larger-than-life alien space wizard, and he does it naturally, rather than relying on overly mannered affectations or fake eccentricity. As Tom Baker has often stated, he didn't even feel like he was really playing a character. He was just being himself. He really is a grandiose, commanding, eccentric, playful, wild bohemian of a man. And he doesn't seem like he could be anything else, even if he tried. If I learned someday that he really was an alien all along, I'd only be half surprised. It's like they found the real Doctor and just put him on TV. Of course, I'd be remiss not to acknowledge the influence that the previous actors who played the Doctor had on the characterization, especially the clever cosmic hobo himself, Patrick Troughton. But nonetheless, it does feel like Tom Baker came in and shocked the series into a higher gear of entertainment, simply by being his over-the-top, unpredictable self.
It may be irrational of me, but human beings are quite my favorite species.
He's the most popular Doctor, he's my first Doctor, and he will always be my favorite Doctor. Let's move on to Sarah. Bill Slater had also suggested Elizabeth Sladen to play Sarah Jane Smith in the previous season, John Pertwee's final season. So he actually deserves a lot of credit in building this winning team that moved forward to create this golden era. Sarah Jane is often cited as the best companion of the classic era, and is certainly the most popular, scoring not one but two spin-off series starring the character, as well as multiple returns to the series proper post-exit. Rewatching this season makes it easy to see why. She's just the perfect blend of feisty, charming, and empathetic, bursting with charisma and heart, and somehow matching and complementing the enormous force of nature that is Tom Baker. The chemistry between the two actors is undeniable, and Sladen has gone on record as saying that she and Tom hit it off right from the jump, and simply got along very well behind the scenes. That friendship constantly makes its way on screen, making the pair a consistent joy to watch. A strong-willed, feminist journalist, she matches the story needs of the character perfectly. Whether she's in detective mode, hero mode, last girl in a horror film mode, or damsel in distress mode, she really is just the perfect companion for this era of Who, and strongly contributes to that lightning-in-a-bottle nature of the season, alongside Baker, Hinchcliffe, and Holmes.
It isn't human, you know. It has no feelings.
Oh, it's got a brain, hasn't it? It walks and talks like us. How can you be sure it doesn't have feelings, too?
And last but not least, let's talk about Harry Sullivan. Ian Marter had played a ship captain in an earlier Pertwee story, Carnival of Monsters, and Letts had remembered him and thought he'd make a good Harry Sullivan. The character was created and cast because, at the time, they didn't know who their Doctor actor was going to be yet, and were considering casting an older actor, in which case they felt they'd need a younger man to do the more physical actions and fight scenes, similar to the dynamic that the first Doctor, William Hartnell, had had with Ian Chesterton and other male companions. Sadly, once they landed on the relatively spry Tom Baker, Harry's role became a bit superfluous, and was minimized in his first season, before being excised entirely earlier in the second season once the actor's contracted number of episodes had run out. Nonetheless, I have a soft spot for Harry, and feel like he adds a much-needed dose of good-natured humor and groundedness in this first Baker season, acting as an effective point-of-view character for newcomers, to contrast the already well-traveled Sarah and alien Doctor. He also acts as an excellent foil for both the other lead actors, his earnest and relatable bumbling playing well off of the Doctor's impatience and Sarah's exasperation. He's a fun and likable character, played to perfection by Ian Marter, and the moments we do get with him are a real treat.
You could sell that thing, Doctor.
I could what?
Oh, jolly useful in Trafalgar Square. I mean, hundreds of bobbies hiding inside it, and then...
Stop burbling.
What?
So that's the main cast, and now I'm just going to go over some of the more notable performances throughout the season. I'm not going to go over every single guest star, but I'm just going to pick out some of the biggest ones and the most impressive ones, the ones that I thought really added to the season. There's no really bad ones. If there were any really bad ones, I would highlight those as well, but I don't think there's anything of note like that. I think it's a really strong season overall from the guest cast angle. We'll start off with the good old reliable unit family of the Brigadier and Sergeant Benton. Sadly, this season is essentially Unit's swan song, as we transition away from the spy thriller unit family era and into the bohemian wanderer gothic horror era. I've already gone over this in more detail in my full robot review, but essentially, while Nicholas Courtney and John Levine are as reliable as ever as the Brigadier and Sergeant Benton, they do feel a little bit like a relic from the past, and don't have especially strong chemistry with the new incoming Doctor in Tom Baker. I love these characters, but without the familial connection of John Pertwee and the years of adventuring they spent together, it just isn't the same. It doesn't feel like the same spark is there with Tom Baker, and it feels clear that their time has passed. Moving on to the villains of Robot, Winters and Jellicoe. These villains are well acted, especially Patricia Maynard as Winters, who gives off strong, what if Hitler were a British female Elon Musk vibes.
For our scientific new order!
Alec Lindstedt as Jellicoe is appropriately sneaky and toad-like. The villain's plan may be stupid and ridiculous, but the actors who play them are good. Edward Burnham delivers an appropriately fidgety and scatterbrained performance as the mad scientist, Professor Kettlewell. His affection for his robotic son is genuinely touching, and he works well as a tragic figure with good intentions but terrible judgment. Moving on to the lead guest cast in The Ark in Space, Noah and Vira. Kenton Moore gives an incredible performance in the face of absurd prosthetics, and he should be commended for that. His slow mental deterioration as his mind and body are taken over by the hive mind is truly chilling stuff. Wendy Williams as Vira is prim and cold at first, but slowly reveals how noble and warm and likable she can be as the situation deteriorates around her and she's forced to take command in order to save humanity. A great guest cast strengthens a great story. Next up, we got the Sontaran experiment, and I'm just going to talk about Styre. Kevin Lindsay returns to play the role he originated. Not as the exact same Sontaran, but a clone, so basically the same guy. His raspy voice, coldly sinister inflections, and constant tongue flicks make for an effectively disturbing monster man for our heroes to face off against, communicating a surprising amount of expression behind a mountain of makeup and prosthetics. Moving on to Genesis of the Daleks. Of course, we have the man himself, Davros, played by Michael Wisher. I mean, what can I say? This is a legendary performance. Not only is the character design brilliant, but the amount of vitriolic megalomania that Michael Wisher injects into the performance is next level. Styre may have had to emote through a mask, but Davros is basically encased in a special effect head to toe, wheeling around in a half-Dalek travel vehicle, only one arm protruding, his head completely encased in a rubber mask that covers his eyes, rendering him effectively blind. His creepy vocal performance is his secret weapon, alternating between menacing purrs of deception, sinister philosophical musings, and sudden bursts of insane megalomaniacal rants, continually rising an octave as he rages in Hitler-esque bouts of fascistic hysteria.
Through the Daleks, I shall have that power!
Michael Wisher delivers the definitive take on Davros, one that every other actor who's ever played the character essentially tries to emulate as closely as possible. The perfect actor to play the perfect imagining of the creator of the Daleks. Next up is Peter Miles as Nyder, another excellent performance in Genesis. Peter Miles' take on Nyder embodies the callousness and cruelty of fascism perfectly. His cold, dead shark eyes and nasal voice sneering out dialogue that's just dripping with smugness and contempt. He plays a snakish underling to the hilt, making for a character that you just can't wait to see get what's coming to him. Moving on to Nicholas Grace as Kellman. This is by far the most entertaining and compelling performance in Revenge of the Cybermen. Nicholas Grace really sells the slimy, self-serving traitor with a mixture of sneering condescension, narcissistic aloofness, and desperate floundering as he constantly switches alliances and attempts to come out on top of a situation that's rapidly spinning out of his control. And that's it for the notable guest cast, so now it's time to move on to everybody's favorite thing, my favorite thing, your favorite thing, which is taking things and putting them in a list, ranking the episodes best to worst. Coming in at number 5, we have Revenge of the Cybermen. This is the only story of the season that I think really drops the ball to any major degree. It just has a lot of flaws. From the unpolished performances, to the weird music, to the hokey alien makeup, to the unintimidating, out-of-character Cybermen. But it isn't a total train wreck, featuring a couple of good guest performances, some fun lines.
Kellman was asked to preserve 3 animal organisms for this purpose.
Isn't it wonderful to feel needed, Commander?
A cool cave setting, and a particularly unhinged performance from Baker. It's just a shame that this otherwise great season ends on its weakest note. Moving on to number 4, we have the Sontaran Experiment. This is a fun little two-parter, featuring an eerie, unsettling environment in the craggy, desolate, post-apocalyptic Earth, a good villain, and a truly disturbing premise of human experimentation lurking just below the surface. The flaws come in the questionable logic of the villains, and the shortness of the story itself limiting how eventful or complex it can be. It's got a cool robot and some fun effects as well, so points for those elements. A breezy, middle-of-the-season runaround to cleanse the palate before things get much more intense in the following story. Alright, moving on. Coming in at number 3, we have the first story of the season, and Tom Baker's first story ever, Robot. This story works perfectly fine as a jumping on point to kick off the new season. It doesn't waste too much time with regeneration hijinks and lets Tom Baker hit the ground running, showcasing his wild, eccentric bohemian doctor right off the bat. This story is primarily built to show off the new Doctor, and Tom Baker kills it from the word go, emerging as a fully formed and enormously entertaining character you just want to keep watching. The robot itself is also an impressive feat of costuming and design, towering over the other actors, clearly built out of strips of real metal, and characterized in a way that makes you really empathize with its plight, in spite of the terrible things it's doing. Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith works well as the heart of the story, feeling sorry for the robot and attempting to dissuade it from some of its more horrific actions through kindness and honesty. The weakness of the story lies primarily in the somewhat sloppy and haphazard nature of the plotting, relying too often on contrived coincidences or the supposedly smart villains making breathtakingly stupid decisions, as well as the story feeling a bit too safe in old hat, a relic of a past era. Still, overall, a totally fun and entertaining story, and a great entry point for new fans. And now we're hitting the really good stuff, the cream of the crop. You know, I actually struggled a little bit on deciding who was going to go in first and who was going to go in second, because I think both of these stories are classics. They are some of the best stories a classic Doctor Who can offer. But in the end, you know, after weighing them against each other, I think one of them stands clearly above the other one, and you'll find out which one that is in just a moment. So, coming in at number 2, we have The Ark in Space. Ark in Space is a true classic. One of the best Holmes pen stories out there, amongst a crowded field of excellent stories written by classic Doctor Who's best writer. This story just feels like it's firing on all cylinders. The spaceship set is truly a wonder, looking authentically futuristic and vast. A clean, bright, sterile environment, full of floor-to-ceiling cryogenics chambers and techie monitors and consoles. The concept is creepy as hell, with aliens that don't just kill you, but absorb you fully, mind and body, into their own hive mind. The bubble wrap may seem dated to modern viewers, but the use of it is so creative, and the actors take it so seriously, that you really do buy into the drama and horror of the situation, making for an effectively desperate, high-stakes scramble to save the last vestiges of humanity from this disturbing, overwhelming threat. It's a tightly written, mystery-laden script, chock full of satisfying reveals and a cathartic ending. Rich themes about humanity's unyielding perseverance in the face of overwhelming adversity are organically interwoven throughout the narrative, making for a particularly satisfying viewing experience. One of my faves, one of the best. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, moving on to number 1, which is, clearly, Genesis of the Daleks. Yes, in the end, the Daleks reign supreme. Or should I say, their creator. This story is also a stone-cold classic. One of the best stories in all of Doctor Who. It is an essential building block in the lore of the series, effectively fleshing out the origins and history of the Doctor's oldest and greatest foes, the Daleks, as well as introducing one of the all-time greatest villains of the series, Davros. The atmosphere of the story feels especially realistic and dangerous, featuring the Doctor and company tramping through body-strewn trenches and across a foggy, foreboding no-man's land, laden with tripwires, poison gas, and landmines. This story draws the most overt and direct parallels to the real-life inspirations for the Daleks, the Nazis, and is all the better for it, telling an affecting and meaningful war story about the dangers of fascism and the horrors of racist ideologies through the exaggerated lens of science fiction. It features real moral dilemmas that the Doctor himself must confront, deepening and complicating his character. This is what Doctor Who does best. The story drives along with twists and turns every few minutes, constantly ramping up the stakes. The wartime setting breeds a sense of danger and impending doom. Tom Baker and the rest of the cast give top-tier performances, and it just feels like everyone working on this can tell that they're making something special. Michael Wisher in particular delivers a scene-stealing take as Davros, and the scenes between him and Baker as they debate their opposing philosophies are especially compelling. One of the greatest, if not the greatest, classic Doctor Who story of all time. So there we go, that is the ranking 1 through 5. I don't think it's incredibly surprising. Feel free to sound off in the comments below if you have a different ranking or you disagree with me, you think I'm crazy, you think Revenge of the Cybermen is a classic and Genesis of the Daleks is incredibly overrated. You're wrong, but feel free to sound off down below. I'd love to hear your opinion. Now it is time to move on to final thoughts. What makes this season so special? What makes this season so great in relation to the other 25 seasons of classic Doctor Who? I'll answer that right now. This season was lightning in a bottle, a rare occurrence where just the right people at just the right time land in just the right circumstances to make the best version of something that they can. In this case, I think those perfect circumstances were, the series had been on for 12 years at this point, and was seasoned enough to have crafted a winning formula and knew how to execute on it. The evolution of the series to include regenerations, and then the switch to color, and then the switch of the genre itself, made the series more open to experimentation and change than other series. This openness allowed the show to grow and evolve when it needed to. The old guard clearly cared deeply about the series, and wanted to hand it off to the next generation in the best possible condition, so it could continue to grow and thrive. The incoming brain trust was a great combination of young, fresh ideas and an old, reliable workhorse. So you got the best of both worlds, combining what worked from the past with a new energy that connected with the younger generation effectively. The incoming producer, Philip Hinchcliffe, was smart enough and humble enough to value the mentorship that Barry Letts offered him, as he got his feet wet and learned the ropes during his first few months on the job. He didn't just come in and arrogantly tear everything down to build what he wanted. He respected the past while organically weaving in his fresh new ideas, slowly crafting the show into his vision over the course of this first season. This is reflected in the collection of episodes we have here. A combination of classic villain returns and fresh new monsters and sci-fi concepts, with a slightly more grounded, darker, mature tone. The loosely interconnected nature of the season, with the events of each story feeding directly into the events of the next one, it makes this season feel unique and even a bit ahead of its time. Almost a prototype for the overarching plots and loose connectivity of the modern era. The season feels like a relatively smooth segue from the Pertwee era to the Baker era, saying goodbye to old friends and familiar locales before jetting off to new horizons. It's exciting without feeling too jarring or alienating. The Pertwee era often felt like a spy thriller, with the Earthbound Doctor hanging out with his unit buddies, solving mysteries and thwarting plots. The stories were often laden with social commentary and political intrigue, tackling issues like diplomacy and environmentalism. It had a maturity to it at times, but could just as often slide into goofy or even panto territory, feeling a bit more like a kid's show, especially with the wide-eyed, youthful flower child aura that Jo Grant would often give out, looking up dotingly at a Doctor who she seemed to adore like a beloved grandfather. In contrast, the new era brought to the forefront the much more adult and assertive Sarah Jane Smith, and her relationship with Tom Baker's Doctor felt much more akin to the best of friends, going off on a wild bar crawl across the galaxy. The adventures had a darker, more horror-tinged tone, and reveled in gothic atmosphere and noir intrigue. The unit family was jettisoned, and a much more freewheeling, untethered Doctor was unleashed on the galaxy at large. The writing just felt that much sharper, that much more clever and biting under the script supervision of Robert Holmes. And the humor primarily came from Baker's eccentricity and brilliant reactions to the most dire of circumstances. The show was still fun and funny, but the humor felt just a little bit more gallows, a reaction or defense against the horrors that were surrounding our heroes.
Good, well now he's got any chance of a cup of tea?
What?
Or coffee. My friend and I have had a very trying experience. Haven't we had a trying experience, Harry?
Very trying, Doctor.
Step into the security scan.
What, no tea?
This mixture of an incredibly charismatic and eccentric leading man, a perfect pair of companions, a darker, more mature tone and subject matter, and a production crew that harmonized well together, respecting the past while bravely forging ahead with their own vision, all combined together to create the best version of Doctor Who I think we've ever had. For a show as wild and ever-changing as Doctor Who, it's incredibly difficult to get that balance right. But this time, this era, just feels like the peak moment when the stars aligned and delivered on the full potential that this show's concept was capable of. While this season is great, it isn't even the best thing that the Golden Era has to offer, as the subsequent 2 seasons headed by Hinchcliffe and Holmes continue to build upon this season's success with increasingly confident and ambitious stories, culminating in 2 following seasons of all-time greats. But as far as this season itself is concerned, I think it's an incredibly impressive achievement that all involved should feel proud of. The start of something truly special. I think this season is the best entry point for any newcomers interested in classic Doctor Who. A great sampler platter of classic and new concepts that's fun the whole way through, if a bit uneven. I give this season a very strong B+. And that is it. That is the end of my review. We have covered the entire first season of Tom Baker's classic season 12 of Doctor Who. And I just want to say really quick, thanks to everyone who's been here this whole time. More to come in the future. I'll just keep rolling forward with the Tom Baker reviews. I'd also like to cover some more modern Who at some point. And I have some ideas from some other goofy, crazy stuff, which you'll see in the near future. But that's it. That's all I gotta say. Until next time, Kay signing out. Oh, perfect timing. Dinner bell.
You want to get some dinner? You want some dinner to the portable?
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go eat. Let's go do this. Come on. Right. There you go, Woofer.